You know what it reminds me of, Jesse? Do you remember in 2016 and 2020, and you had these women, they're memes now of them crying when Donald Trump won, just the outbreak. I remember waking up at 2 a.m. and watching liberals just shed liberal tears. That is what's happening. Why? Because America won today. Imagine crying because the Constitution is standing strong and we're not going to turn into Cuba. That's Trump derangement syndrome 101 right there. We're so upset because the Constitution was upheld today, because the Supreme Court showed us that we are not Cuba, we are not a third world country, we are not a banana republic, and that the things I've seen over the past 4 months in New York are not going to become America. And what does MSNBC, The View, and CNN do? They have tantrums.
Before he takes the stand to defend himself, Ms. Habba, tell me the questions you're going to ask in open court and tell me exactly what he's going to respond. And then edited my questions, edited the response he was allowed to give. And guess what my client did? He took the stand. He abided by the rules of this corrupt system that I have seen. We will immediately appeal. We will set aside that ridiculous jury. And I just want to remind you all of one thing. I will continue with President Trump to fight for everybody's First Amendment right to speak. Everybody's a right to defend themselves when they are wrongfully accused and to be able to say, I didn't do it.
The former Trump Organization chief financial officer and protector of the Trump family money raising his hand today and admitting that he lied under oath.
Are you familiar with that acronym?
I've heard of that, yes.
Okay.
In a 2020 video deposition and on the stand during the civil fraud trial last year when the New York Attorney General accused Trump of inflating his assets for his financial benefit.
They are the fraudulent people because they ruled a house that was worth 18, they put down is worth 18 million and it's worth maybe close to 100 times that amount.
You have to come up with something like $400 million. How close are you to securing the bond, or what you need for that?
I have a lot of money. I could do what I want to do, but this was a horrible, illegal decision. This was a decision made up by a crooked judge, 100% crooked clubhouse judge, a disgrace with a equally crooked attorney general who campaigned on I will get Trump. And we're appealing that decision, and we'll see how we do. But I'll tell you what, people are leaving New York. Businesses are fleeing New York because of that decision. They used a statute to go after me that was never used before.
So you're not
never
worried?
Used before.
You're not worried about the money?
I don't worry about anything. No, I don't worry about the money. I don't worry about money.
Last month, we covered a story about Trump's accountant, Alina Weisselberg, in which he may have committed perjury. So here's an update for you. Just a quick recap of that story. Trump was on trial in New York over allegations that he had committed bank fraud by artificially inflating the value of his properties and assets. That case has since concluded with the judge ordering Trump to pay $355 million in fines and $98 million in pre-judgment interest. Weisselberg was involved in this trial, but as it was ongoing, the New York Times broke a story that Weisselberg had been secretly negotiating a plea deal with the Manhattan DA. The DA was accusing Weisselberg of lying under oath to the AG's office. In other words, Weisselberg was being accused of lying during the bank fraud trial, and Weisselberg was pleading guilty to that charge. When the judge in the bank fraud trial heard about this, he asked for the New York AG and the Trump team to respond. Later that day, Trump's lawyer Alina Habba sent a scathing letter to Judge Engoron complaining about even being asked to respond to a story in the New York Times. She refused to provide any details regarding Weisselberg's questionable testimony, stating that she was, quote, constrained by her professional ethical obligations from providing any further detail. She called the New York Times story a, quote, speculative news account, and she called the reporting, quote, unsubstantiated. She also tried to argue that, quote, the court lacks the legal authority under New York law to take judicial notice of news stories. And she cited precedents from a 1998 case stating, quote, a court may only apply judicial notice to matters of common and general knowledge, well established and authoritatively settled, not doubtful or uncertain. So, in order for her dismissal of the judge's request to seem valid, she had to invalidate the New York Times and its reporting, which is pretty standard MAGA protocol. That was nearly a month ago. Now it's being reported that Weisselberg has pleaded guilty to perjury in the civil fraud trial. These are felony charges that he's pleading guilty to. He's already served 3 months at Rikers, and now he's sentenced to another 5 months in prison. In a few weeks from now, Trump is set to face trial against the Manhattan DA, in which he's accused of falsifying business records, so a second guilty plea and second conviction of his longtime accountant and former CFO is not helping what was already a strong case against Trump. Additionally, this second conviction sends a strong message to anyone else testifying on behalf of Trump in the upcoming case that perjury will not be tolerated in the slightest. In the bank fraud trial, when Judge Engoron was questioning the legitimacy of Weisselberg's testimony, he cited falsus in uno, which means false in one thing, false in everything. So if a witness is shown to be unreliable, that testimony is completely unreliable. In the upcoming proceedings, the Trump legal team has to overcome the fact that they have been shown to be willing to lie under oath and to present false witnesses. So these are just the facts. You can do with them what you will. I think it's safe to say, as we saw a month ago, that evidence of perjury, even the admittance of perjury, is not enough to sway Trump supporters away from him, either as their messiah or as their presidential candidate. And as all of this is going on, it's Super Tuesday. So by the time you watch this video, we may have a better idea of just how well Trump is performing as the Republican frontrunner for the presidential nomination. However, even with these civil and criminal trials, and even as the courts debate whether or not Trump should even be allowed to run for president, I think it's safe to say that he will be on the ballot in November as the Republican presidential candidate. And I don't love making political predictions usually, but I just can't imagine him not being the presidential candidate again. So if you weren't already, get ready for another Trump v. Biden this November, and it's going to be interesting. The stakes are higher than they were 4 years ago. Trump has spent the last 4 years refusing to acknowledge or apologize for his attempt to dismantle democracy in this country, racking up felonies and fines, and promising more authoritarian tactics in his second term as president. Meanwhile, the Biden administration has been doubling down on its support for Israel, even as polling shows that the majority of Democratic voters are not similarly supportive of Israel, with VP Harris reaffirming her stance that Israel has the right to defend itself, and with Biden himself proclaiming to be a Zionist. Good luck to all of us in November and beyond. All right, that's it for me. If you got anything out of this, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and check out my podcast, Modern Context. Thanks.